Now, talking as you were, Scott, of films that wouldn't work with a slight deviation or something, a character not doing a thing, The Spanish Prisoner.
Yes, and
which, as we firmly established in a previous episode, is fine.
Yeah, I think I first stumbled across Spanish Prisoner less because it's a David Mamet film, which it is, and more as part of a search to find something that Steve Martin isn't unwatchably awful in. And it turns out, unbelievable as that may seem, there's at least 2 such films, but that's a different episode. In this, Campbell Scott's engineer Joe Ross is whisked away to the exotic island of Valverde, probably, to meet with his corporate tie muckety bucks about the potentially incredible value of the process he has just finalised. I believe it was the process for refining megaphinium to unobtainium, and we can all imagine how profitable that would be. He's here with his day-to-day co-workers, Ricky Jay's company lawyer George Lang and Rebecca Pidgeon's secretary Susan, who seems to be quite taken with Joe. While there, he meets some of friend Steve Martin's wealthy stranger, Julian Jimmy Dell, who he comes to trust so much that when Dell asks him to carry a package back to his sister in New York, he agrees without even questioning what the contents are. Still, Susan's prompting sees him open it up to find out that Dell is apparently on the up and up and serious about introducing him to his sister. So this friendship would appear to come into its own when the company appears to be positioning themselves to screw Joe out of any bonus or cut in the proceeds of the process, so Joe asks for Dell's advice, which is, of course, just another domino in a chain started long ago. Now, I don't think anyone is best served by a blow-by-blow plot recap from this point. Wikipedia is over there if you need it, other than to say that Joe does indeed lose the process, and his attempts to regain it and escape from the frame job he's been put in will see him in ever-increasing danger as he runs out of people to trust. Yes, I first watched this a long time ago, maybe even before seeing Glengarry Glen Ross, so the Memetian dialogue was something of a revelation at that point. It's less so now, of course. Glengarry is where that style of speech worked as a chorus, and here it's a couple of good verses, Martin, Scott, with occasional off-key screeching, Rebecca Pidgeon. Still, if you like this sort of thing, this is the sort of thing you'll like, and thankfully I am a fan of Mamet's affectations, although it won't change anyone's mind if they're fond of it. I've also now rewatched this enough over my long decades and decades on this accursed planet that it's certainly past the point of diminishing returns and into actively hurting it territory, so I'm not sure how I would react if I was watching this cold. Certainly my first viewing was enhanced by not having quite the level of cynicism I do now when approaching movies like this, and I'd perhaps have been less impressed with the plot if I'd applied my now standard operating protocol of assume everyone is not who they claim to be, and that would certainly throw into rather starker relief the failure points of this multi-layered con, which is altogether too fragile to exist outside of a cinema, but that is rather the case with a lot of the genre, I suppose. Even so, I still like Campbell Scott's performance, and indeed still wonder why he never had quite the break I feel he deserved as a career, and Steve Martin still manages to surprise me to this day by not being awful here. In fact, he's quite good. Turns out that it's just this comedy stuff that he can't do without making my teeth grind into a fine powder.
Are you reading my mind, Scott? Also my notes for something else I mentioned later.
I think despite my earlier protestations that on a first view there's enough densely layered, ultimately silly cons and twists going on to keep this entertaining, so I'm going to recommend this, albeit not as vociferously as I might have done had you asked me sometime back in the 90s? Eesh.
I think that's maybe the early 2000s, the first time I remember you mentioning it to me. Mm-hmm. You have been talking about this film for a while.
Yes.
Yeah, can I ask, before I go on, the other not awful Steve Martin performance, is it Bowfinger?
It is Bowfinger, yes. Which admittedly I have not returned to in a good long while, so I don't want to, just in case he actually was awful in it and it would ruin my innocence.
No, I keep thinking, like, I find my internal monologue is thinking, Steve Martin's a terrible actor. He's not, actually. What he is someone who's a decent actor who makes terrible acting choices, which is not the same thing.
Yes.
And, well, he's not funny, but look, I will submit another entirely tolerable, in fact, even quite good Steve Martin performance, and that's Planes, Trains and Automobiles.
There can't be 3.
I mean, he's obviously, there are sort of like 3.5, again, something I'm going to mention later. I won't mention it just now, though, but he's obviously completely acted off screen by John Candy, who was great. But yeah, Planes, Trains and Automobiles, he's not bad in, and he's playing more of a straight guy, and it actually works for him.
Yeah.
And here in Spanish Prisoner is a sort of slightly sinister character. He works.
Yeah.
So it's not his abilities, it's his choices, and the fact he's not funny. So
which, to be fair, is a problem for a comedian.
a problem for for someone who's cast as a comedy actor. Like, well, I'm not saying he's a comedian because he's not funny. That's kind of a prerequisite. But yes, but you mentioned Scott getting to the point of diminishing returns. I got to that in the second viewing, which I did yesterday or the day before. I had never seen this, partly put off by Steve Martin. Oh dear. Already trying to put him out of my mind. So I put off by Steve Martin, but I remember you having talked about this a number of times, not like repeatedly or anything, but a number of times over the years. Finally watched it when we did our David Mamet one, which was earlier this year, right?
Yeah.
David Mamet episode, not that long ago. And it was fine. That's the best I could say. It was fine. I do like Campbell Scott a lot. I don't think I've seen him in much. The only thing that immediately comes to mind
This and Roger Dodger. That's it, yeah.
Yeah.
He's been in other things that I've seen, I think, but he must have had such a minor role. I don't remember him being in them at all. So, yeah.
The only other thing is I do remember is Roger Dodger with Jesse Eisenstein. That's not his name.
Eisenberg?
Eisenberg, yeah. I knew Eisenstein didn't sound right. Jesse Eisenberg. And yeah, really liked that, but that was like 2002. That's 2 decades ago now. Again, I've probably seen him in pieces, bit parts, but not much. It's a pity because I really like him. And the Mametian dialogue is, it depends so much on the delivery.
Yeah.
Again, like we talked about, I don't know, maybe you just can't write female characters well, David Mamet, but when we talked about House of Games, which is another Con film, but we've already done that.
Yeah.
The woman in that, Lindsay Mamet wife.
Lohan.
That's it. Yeah.
Very early role for her, yeah.
Yeah. I forget her surname, but you know what I mean. She was David Mamet's wife at the time. She's the star of House of Games. She's really wooden, and it really makes the dialogue obviously bad.
Yes.
Yeah. Whereas with the right actor, the dialogue sings. Look at every single person in Glengarry Glen Ross.
Yeah.
So yeah, here it works. Steve Martin can deliver the dialogue quite well, and Campbell Scott, he's great. Ben Gazzara's a bit stiff. Ricky Jay, he doesn't have a lot to do actually.
No,
I would say. But yeah, Rebecca Pidgeon is she's wooden.
Yeah, she's the obvious weak link in it. I wonder if it's as much the editing as there's something about she's been given like buffers on the start and end of her speech, which makes it sound like she's just dropped in from another conversation entirely. Whereas the whole point of it is, the way it's written is people kind of interrupting and stopping each other the way that, in a way, that conversations can actually happen. But this is taking away that conversations can actually happen and filmed it in a way that they couldn't. And it seems weird in places.
Yeah. It's like, I don't know. I mean, she's not bad. And she's a lot better in Heist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But she just, I don't know, the dialogue's just not coming snappily out of her mouth. And it's, she's not a good match for the dialogue at the very least.
Yeah, that's reasonable, yeah.
Which makes, but the bigger problem I have with the film is just the script. Now, I was very conscious both of the times that I've watched this of the fact that I am, 1,000 years old or whatever I am now. I forget, it's been a while. And I've seen a lot of films. So there's always a possibility. And yes, there's like this, the undercurrent, like you mentioned, Scott, just, I'll to put it slightly less politely, being a suspicious bastard, you just assume nobody is what they seem to be. So I'm conscious of the fact that I've watched a lot of films in this genre. So, I mean, are there conventions here that if you're not seeing as many, you'll be more surprised by things? But no, I don't think David Mamet writes twists particularly well. And I mentioned that in our David Mamet episode. But I got to the point of diminishing returns with this very quickly. And so when I watched it the last time, it was fine. I quite enjoyed it. And it's not been that long since the last time, so there's that to take into account.
Yeah. But
I watched it a couple of days and I've very much downgraded it from fine to...
Yeah.
And how you would write that sound. There's also, I think part of the problem is the direction, actually, whether that's played into the editing issues you're talking about, Scott. Whether David Mamet himself has directed the editor, Barbara Tulliver, to edit in a particular way around Rebecca Pidgeon. But the whole thing, it just feels kind of slightly clunky, slightly.
Yeah, it felt stagey is not quite the right word for it because it has implications of things that the rest of the film doesn't really back up to. But the way the dialogue is handled seems a bit kind of stagey. Well, there's a lot of kind of projecting to the back of the room in places as well, which didn't really fit in with the whole jive of it being like an actual conversation. Things like that don't quite. It's just a bit alien, which is odd. Yeah.
Not even that, but more just like the way sort of things are flagged up. It all seemed a bit artless, really. Because like there's so many things like very deliberate, obvious sort of clues and even the kind of emotions that like the camera lingers on for a bit. And again, maybe this is a problem with editing, that it seems so long. But like there's the X-ray machine in the start of the film. Oh, there's going to be an X-ray machine that's important later. Is that what you're saying? Oh, it turns out an X-ray machine is sort of important later.
Yeah.
And the video security system, and then the passing of the FBI business card to Susan. Then, for some reason, as if like it's just going to trying to give away everything at the beginning of the film, Susan constantly saying, "Anybody could be anybody."
Yeah,
it's so artless.
Yeah,
and the lingering shots of the Sunshine Bakery bag and the Be Prepared knife, and it's saying things like "Nobody looks at Japanese tourists." It's like. It all feels very much like pay attention, there's going to be a quiz later.
Yes.
Giving you like extra chance to get the points.
Yeah, that's true. It's not subtle in a lot of regards.
No.
Yeah.
And this time, I wasn't watching it any less critically the last time, I think, but maybe being more familiar, there was sort of more mental capacity to think about things in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
So I was like, came with this huge list of problems, the film, primarily of which, I don't know why it didn't occur to me the first time, I was like, who keeps a picture of their sister in their wallet? That's weird. That's really weird, and it's a really crucial plot point, which is why it's in the wallet, but that's a weird thing to do.
Yeah.
And not a relevant thing, but when they're when Ricky Jay's been to the casino in San Estef, that island operates on the world's that world operates in the world's oldest banknotes.
Yes.
Which look like just
like A4 paper. Yeah.
Yeah, somebody took a bunch of receipts out of a jacket they hadn't put on since the 1970s, and that was their money.
Yeah. Look, it's been hard since Matrix left the island, you know.
And there's other things too, just like in the structure, it feels. And it's the other thing I see a lot, because it kind of bothers me, like time frames in films, that sometimes the teams seem too compressed, and this is another one. This happens over 4 or 5 days, I guess.
Yeah.
You see a calendar right near the start when he's meant to go to dinner with Steve Martin. I think it's the 12th of March. It ends on St. Patrick's Day, so it's like 5 days.
Yeah.
It takes place over. But then Steve Martin advises Joe that they'll start treating you cruelly. And then it happens the next day.
Yeah.
That's when his company starts trying to screw him over. I'm like, I would be a bit suspicious about that. But Joe isn't, because I like Amber Ross, but his character's a simpleton. Why would you actually bring the secret MacGuffin formula with you? Well, you'd do it if you're a simpleton. And Joe signs this big elaborate card that turns out to be a request for asylum to the Consul of Venezuela. And in that huge card, he didn't notice that all of the writing was Spanish. He didn't notice one word.
Yeah.
No, because he's a simpleton, and also the script demands it, the plot demands it. So yeah, it sort of fell apart for me on the second viewing.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of the problems had been there first, but like they were just kind of more highlighted the second time.
Yeah, you can give it a bit of a pass on the first view, because you're not. It depends. I mean, I think all of these films, if you were sitting there pausing and making notes, would fall apart instantly. But if it's good enough and interesting enough, and you're happy enough to buy into the characters, and you, in this instance, I guess, liked Campbell Scott's performance enough to kind of buy into him as an everyman and all that kind of thing, and just go with the experience of it, then it's certainly much easier to live with it on a first viewing. And every time you watch it after that, you're going to pick up. But again, as I was saying, you could say that about pretty much every film that we're going to talk about here.
To an extent, I think. The problem is, now whether it's because I enjoyed other films we're going to talk about more, maybe, but this feels like the issue is not so much that you like one thing depends on like a coincidence or someone acting a certain way. It's that
all of this,
things do. Yeah. I mean, it's not quite to the extent of The Game, which is like a just genuinely bad film because it's so nonsensical. Not a single thing in that film makes sense, and any one thing that anybody does differently in that film, all of which would be the sort of thing that anybody would do. If they weren't in a film that demanded it, they did it because of the script. It'd fall apart. It's not quite that level, but it's not far off.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're relying on, for instance, confronting Jimmy Dale at the garage when he sees him. They plant the driver with the scar on his face outside the door so he sees him, but he might just be pissed off or maybe not remember that guy.
Yeah.
Right? But you're relying on Joe going up and confronting Jimmy Dale, and there's no real suggestion that the villains can really like think on their feet and improvise if things don't go as planned. They've all read the script, they all know it's going to work. And like, why after everything that's happened, all the people that screwed him over and all the things that turned out to be fake, why trust Susan? Especially given Susan was the source of the fake FBI business card.
Yeah.
And then got suspicious police officers at the airport, but an argument's enough to make them not even check.
Yeah.
Okay, and then like, I know this isn't really like the same thing, but it stuck out to me this time. Like, why does Susan have a ticket to San Estef and not from San Estef? She'd already used her ticket to there to get there in the first place. Why is her ticket? I'm getting to the weeds on that one. I'll accept, right? But then, Joe is handed this bag, and apparently a cheap plastic camera weighs the same as a loaded pistol. And then Joe just happens to leave the airport, which is presumably unexpected. Everybody's expecting to get arrested in the airport, possibly shot, and then gets on the bus for which, like, picks that bus outside the airport. Nobody's expecting to go outside the airport, and the bus that he picks, US Marshals didn't follow him onto, were already queuing for.
Yeah.
And then he happens to get on that boat that Steve Martin is already on and the US Marshals already on. Again, it's like they read the script. So sadly this just completely fell apart for me in the second viewing. And Campbell Scott's enough to carry quite a bit of it on his own. The dialogue isn't too badly slaughtered by other people. It's not right in their mouth. They don't deliver it well, but yeah, it's unfortunately definitely considerably worse on the second viewing. And also, on a final note, the ridiculous concealed weapon, some sort of shotgun cum rifle by size and weight that takes an age to draw, raise and aim, and to hit a target a few metres away is about to kill someone. But I guess it looks cool concealed inside a souvenir, right? Yes, not brilliant, this film, I have to say, not brilliant.
What annoys me most is despite it being called The Spanish Prisoner, describing the Spanish Prisoner Con, it's not a Spanish Prisoner Con in the slightest. It's a Kansas City Shuffle, but c'est la vie.
Yeah.